Periodically Productions presents Fairy Tales for Unwanted Children. Ship. Written and read by Scott Thrower. In days gone by, there was a ship that skimmed the ocean like a knife. It may have been the height of the masts or the way its thin belly met the water. It could have been the trim of the sails or the smoothness of its skin. But nothing else that sailed the sea could touch it. It kissed the wind, and the wind kissed back. This ship flew across the waves, trailing froth and foam, safe in the protective hands of the wind. Threatening storms would split before it, and rival boats would find themselves becalmed as the ship skipped past, its sails full with the besotted wind. Even at anchor with its sails furled, the ship would gently rock with the breath of the wind. The wind saw itself in the ship in a way it never had before. They played among the rocks, and the ship became ever more daring as the wind guided it safely through. When the wind sang to it, the ship would dance up and down the hilly waves. They liked to race against boats and whales and the great beasts of the sea, but they would never lose. Instead, they'd tire themselves and lie in the calm, sleeping under the warm glow of the sun or the cool wonder of the stars. Sometimes the ship would go away, clustering itself among other boats and ships of the sea and the land. The wind waited, playing with the clouds and birds at wing, but the wind kept watch, wondering why the ship lingered so long and when it would return. But it always did. Sometimes it returned with new colors upon its sails or new sounds upon its deck. Often the ship would whistle new tunes, and the wind would do its best to learn them. Many times it came back heavy and slow, and for weeks their dances would be different, gentler, and the wind wondered what it meant. There were times, too, when the wind went away, stirring up clouds and raking through mountains and plains, inventing storms safely away from the ship's path. But it would always race back and kiss the ship again, as if it had never been gone. Once the wind tried to take the ship ashore, wanting to show it all of the places it could go, but the ship made such torturous noises as it approached the beach that the wind never tried it again, deciding that the ship was a creature of the sea and accepting it. Then there came a day when the wind returned from a long time away, still alive with the lust of storming, still feeling the way trees and mountains had raked across its belly as it ran, and it found the ship leaning in the water, with a cracked mast and smoke upon its skin. The ship limped its way towards shore, and the wind hesitated to touch it for fear that it would crumble away and sink beneath the water. The wind had seen it before, the fragility of boats and beasts and land. And if the wind feared anything, it was the awesome might of water. With each passing hour, water pulled at the ship, and eventually the wind had to gently push the ship along until it was clustered among its own kind at the land's edge. And there it stayed for the longest time yet, while the wind fussed and fretted across the bay, whipping sand and trees about in its worry. But the ship came back. Quieter, but with brighter sails upon its masts. Again they danced across the ocean and played their games, skipping between rocks and wandering through waves. But now the wind was gentler. It didn't push as hard. It was watchful and smoothed the water out so as to not jostle the ship upon the waves. They stayed farther from the rocks that would scrape the ship's belly. Things were different. When the ship would try to skim the ocean, the wind would slow it down. When the ship steered towards a storm, the wind wouldn't just push the storm away. It would also push the ship back, to make sure they never came close to meeting. The wind also noticed things. Now the ship was hesitant when it met the others. It would slow when it saw a mast on the horizon, and if it saw a darker boat with black sails, it would immediately turn and run. The wind watched this for weeks before it understood, thinking back to the cracked mast and the smoke upon its skin. And then the wind grew angry. It swatted away the other boats before they became a concern until no boats were left upon the sea. It pushed and pulled its beloved boat so that it could freely sail without the danger of enemies or rocks or land. When the ship would approach a cluster of boats and ships of the sea and the land, perched at the water's edge, the wind would rise up, take the ship in its arms, and take them both back out to the safety of open water. For an entire season, the wind and the ship were alone together. Though the wind could feel the ship's loneliness each time it tried to pull itself back towards the shore. The ship sent up little specks of color along its masts and pulled against the wind's grasp, but the wind knew best. The ship sent out small boats, but the wind reached out for those and brought them back, safe on the calm of the sea. Another season passed, and the ship settled into its safety, relaxing in the wind's protective embrace, and they continued to travel from one side of the ocean to the other. The wind grew concerned as the ship's sails grew shabby, and the ship's kisses grew weak, so they no longer raced along the waves. The ship's colors grew less vibrant as they bleached in the sun, and the ship grew quiet and still, no longer singing its songs, or raising and lowering the scraps of sails the way it had done before. And soon the wind found that when it let the ship go, it would list to the side and bob, and there were no games left to play. The wind spent days watching its ship list in the sea, waiting for it to awaken. It nudged the ship with breezes and storms, whipping the water into a chaos of waves and then smoothing them back again. But the ship did not respond. In desperation, the wind took the ship back towards the land, seeking a place where other boats and ships of the land and sea clustered along the edge. The trip took weeks because the wind did not want the ship to tip as it had seen many do before, and be claimed by the water's grasp. When they arrived, the ship was low in the water, and the sails were mere strings against the sky. Still, the wind pushed the ship down the narrow path between the rocks and towards an open bay that bristled with masts. But the other boats pulled away. Some escaped out into the ocean, while others fired warnings towards the listing ship, which the wind knocked away. The wind reached out its arms, pulling those boats towards its ship, first calling out to them in a low, soft moan that quickly rose to mournful shrieks. And several boats were capsized and crushed. The waters of the bay stole many of the boats into its mysterious depths as the wind raced about, pushing boats and ships together so that they might help. But none did. And the wind fell exhaustedly upon the water of the bay and the broken ships of land and sea, moaning up at the night sky and the cool, unfeeling light of the stars. When finally the wind rose and reached out to gather up its ship, there was nothing left. Just the quiet of the bay and the deep, unknowable depths of the water. Did you find a moral for this week's story? Let us know on Twitter at periodicallypod, or join the Fairy Tales for Unwanted discussion group on Facebook. For more fairy tales for unwanted children, join us at unwantedchildren.ca.